G'day and welcome back. I'm Brett and welcome to Reliance Australia. So today's job, we're back up in the shed and we're going to be building a desk. So we've been in lockdown for a long time. Part of that has been a lot of homeschooling, and having that little space in the bedroom for the kids is really important. So today what I'm going to do is try and make a small desk that fits in the corner beside her cupboard and the wall. Don't know how this is going to go because, like pretty much everything else on this channel, I've never done it before. So let's have a crack and see how we go. But look, at the end of the day, I'm trying to make this table for probably about $100. So we'll see how it turns out. So there's the tabletop. Look, I bought put together already, just from the local hardware store, so from the local Bunnings. As you can see, it comes wrapped in plastic. So that was 1200 long in length and 600 wide. The space I have is only about 1100 long, and look, I can only really come out about 500, maybe 510 mils. So I'm gonna have to trim that back. But look, that was the tabletop. It's nicely stained, all put together, nice level surface. I wouldn't have been able to build one for the same cost, so that was a good start. Tools I'm going to be using, I have a little drop saw that I'll be able to plug in and take outside. But because we're up in the shed, as you know, I don't have power up here yet, so I'll be cranking up the generator to do that. I will probably be using my little portable workbench as well, because at some stage to get that tabletop, I'll probably use my electrical saw, circular saw, and I'll probably do that outside as well. But also, I'm just going to be using my driver for the drill, put the screws in. That's pretty much it. Obviously, tape measure, pencil, square, those type of things. But not a great lot of stuff. But look, these are things that I do use a lot. And look, they're not expensive pieces of kit. I think this little drop saw, I think it was about $100, but look, I've had that for quite some time. While it's not a tradesman grade drop saw, and I would love a bigger one, look, at the moment it does the job. Look, it doesn't go through really big timber, but the 90 by 45 stuff that I'm using, it definitely goes through that reasonably well. But anyway, we'll start measuring up and start cutting. So we've measured it out. As I said, we only want to make it 1100 long and about 500 deep. So essentially what I did, I just, because it's 1200 from the shop, I just set my set square at 100 mils and ran that along the edge, put my pencil mark in. And you might notice I've got these extra little marks that go across, and that's to indicate to me which side is going to be the waste side, and I've done that along here as well. I've also written on here which part I want to see is the back. So this is the part that's going to go up against the wall, and this is the other side that's going up the other side wall, because they're not going to be visible. So this other end, which is this side, minus this is also the bottom that you're showing I'm showing at the moment. The other side here will be visible as you walk into the room. So I want that nice shop finished edge on it. Look, I will be able to put a bit of stain on here if I get too carried away, but we'll just see how we go. So far that looks pretty good. What I am going to do though is I've got this piece of wood here. I'm going to use it as a straight edge. I'm going to clamp that onto the table so I can use the circular saw and run the circular saw up against it. Because I know I've probably mentioned this before, notoriously I don't cut super straight. So I'm hoping that by having a nice solid straight edge clamped there, that I'll be able to get a nice straight edge, and that'll make it look so much better. Okay. Here we go. So the straight edge I showed you before, I didn't use because, as I said at the very start, I haven't done this before, and it was too thick for the circular saw to actually run up against, because obviously you can see the motor that sticks out the side. Yeah, that wouldn't actually run and touch the timber as it was cutting through. So I had to find another piece of wood, which I luckily had down in the garage for another job that I had put aside. Be honest, I'd actually forgotten that was down there, but I went down there to pick up this old piece of ply that was an offcut, until I realised that I've already cut that, and so it's probably not perfectly straight anyway. So this one looks good. So I've now clamped that down. If you're wondering what that gap is, it's 100mm, because that's the space of the base plate on the Makita saw there. Not sponsored by Makita, by the way. But look, that's something that was passed down to me when my dad passed away. So I know it looks new because it was new. Unfortunately, he lived with dementia for a few years before he passed, so he was buying things that he never used. But anyway, so that's it. Also had to get the generator out. You can see the cord that I've got there running across. Got the generator set up. I'm about to start that up. That'll power up the saw, and we'll go from there. So the straight edge I used was a piece of wood, and it's actually about 12mm in thickness. And look, that's about the right height. I couldn't use anything any higher than that, because otherwise the motor that sticks out the side of the circular saw would be catching on it. As it is, I need to be very careful about where I put the clamps, but look, it worked really well, and I was happy with the outcome that I got. So here I'm cutting up all the pieces for the framing of the legs. You'll see what that looks like a bit further on into the video. But what I do, I measure each one individually, as opposed to pre-measuring and putting my lines on all at the start, because the blade is a couple of mils thick, and that will change the length of your measurements as you go through. So I do one at a time, just to make sure that each of them is exactly the same length as we go through. And that actually worked well for me this time. So that's the wood that I've just cut for the legs. So essentially the long ones are 700 long, so it's going to be 700 mils high to the base of the table. So I think the tabletop's about 18 mils, so what's that, probably 3/4 of an inch thick. So it's just going to be just over 700 mils high at the top of the table. And those shorter pieces are 360. So by the time I screw them into the 90x45s, I'll end up with a frame that's about 450 across. The tabletop is about 510 in width, so that'll give us, you know, probably about what, 20, 30 mils either side, front and back. So that'll take into account for things like skirting boards that are on the wall, so that way we can push the table right up against the wall, and the table legs won't be interfering with the skirting boards or anything like that at the floor level. So now it's just a case of, I'm going to trim up those rough edges, and I'll be using the trusty old hand plane. So in Australia we have the old Stanley, if you can see that. Like, this is an old one that's been restored quite some time ago, and well, it might look a bit rusty. That's just a bit of oil I've put on it. So it's not actually oily. I'm not really rusty at the moment. Yeah, so I'm just going to chamfer the edges and take all those splinters off, and then we'll get stuck into screwing them all together. I think there's something satisfying about to be able to sit down and take the rough edges off a piece of timber, and it's really great to be able to sit up in the shed and kick back in the quiet and solitude up there, looking out over the hills, and just make sure your pieces of timber before your assembly are all nice and smooth. And look, then they'll just start screwing together. Look, I've just used the driver to screw it all together. Nothing too over the top. It's pretty straightforward, and look, I've kept the design very, very simple, because that's probably the level of my expertise. In the end, look, you'll see me doing on the mat. I've got it upside down. I wouldn't normally work on those mats, but this particular case the timber was clean and easy to use. So these legs are nice and stable, they're nice and solid, but to stop them from being either bent in or pushed in, I've actually applied a brace to it as well, and that has kept it rock solid. So there we have a job done, completed. Looks pretty nice and solid. So the bench top is screwed in from the bottom. We've got 90x45 pine. So what's that? 3x2s, I suppose? No, not quite. So it'll be dressed 4x2s nearly, because the 100mm is normally a 4x2. So these will be dressed. So 90x45s. They're normally what we use for framing. Over here, so as you can see from the sides, it's a pretty basic design, because I'm a pretty basic builder. And to give it a bit of support across this way so the legs don't actually collapse in, I'll just use the offcut from the back of the tabletop that I cut off earlier, so it's about 100 mil high. And I've screwed that to the back of the leg, so now those legs won't collapse in. But look, I'm really happy with that. That's come good. And more importantly, the customer is happy. So my daughter is very happy that she's now going to have a little desk that she can use in her room. And I'm sure it should last at least a week before it's covered in toys. But hopefully, maybe I'll do some schoolwork on it. We'll see. I'm getting that look. But anyway, look, I'm really happy that job is done. Look, if you've enjoyed that, please give it the big thumbs up. Hit the subscribe, and if you want to get notifications, hit that little bell as well. But once again, thanks for coming along to the channel. Thanks for sharing this little job with us. Look, I was pretty happy with the way it came together. And I have to say, I did try and keep it fairly simple. I kept all the measurements, standard across, so the legs at 700, in between at 360, so they're all the same length. I didn't try any fancy bracings or anything like that, so at the back is probably the only bracing that's there, and that's an offcut from the tabletop. So I was really happy with that all up. So all up, what did I use? I used one piece of tabletop. Look, that cost me just under $50, so $49. A few screws which I already had because I've been building stuff around the property for the last few years, so I didn't have to go out and buy any more screws. And maybe just over over 4 meters of framing material. So look, well and truly, we've come close to that, about $100. And look, I'm pretty happy that looks fairly nice for a $100 table. And of course, we can always stain it. So my daughter's just going to work out what color she wants to stain it or whether she wants to leave it like that. She may even paint it yet, we're not too sure. So we'll see where that all ends up. But once again, thanks very much. And until next time, I'll see you then.